Well done, Bruce Lee. But those men were flabby and weak.
Karate Kid?
Kid? I'm 35. You lack focus. My master will teach you.
Arnold from Happy Days? The brisk iced tea? Where did you get that? Editing mistake in my favor. Brisk, baby! Only fool fight man with brisk.
The arrival. The target. The pursuit. The confrontation. The Terminator. Arnold Schwarzenegger is the Terminator. Rated R. The #1 movie in the USA is now playing everywhere.
Are you troubled by strange noises in the middle of the night?
Do you experience feelings of dread in your basement or attic?
Have you or any of your family ever seen a spook, specter, or ghost?
If the answer is yes, then don't wait another minute. Pick up your phone and call the professionals. Go, Ghostbusters! Our courteous and efficient staff is on call 24 hours a day to serve all your supernatural elimination needs.
We're ready to believe you!
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of a contradictory thoughts. Our purification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people. One will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
Man, you know, before we get started, I got I'm sitting here at that 1984 commercial is really, really timely, even now. It is oddly prescient, you know.
Was anybody like, wait a minute, is this 2020? That's exactly
seriously, it's a little crazy. But hi, everybody. Welcome to the Late Show. This is Pop Con Con's 11 p.m. broadcast. We are talking about the year 1984 and why it was such a landmark moment in cinema. I'm going to go ahead and go through and introduce everybody. My name is Sean. I am one half of Pop Cycle Bobbles. My other half is Laura. She'll be inside of the chat room saying hello, so feel free to talk with us. But to my screen left is my good buddy Eric. So Eric, please say hello and introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi there. I am Eric Ratcliffe, the host of the Why I Love Comics podcast, the co-creator and star of the awesome webcomic New Comic Day, and all-around pop culture junkie, as well as probably 3 years too young to be on this panel, but still.
That's okay. We won't hold it against you. But to his immediate left is my friend Michael. Michael, if you don't mind, please introduce yourself and let everybody know about you.
Absolutely. I am Michael Falkner. I live in the Atlanta, Georgia area. I am a writer and a podcaster, and most of my work these days is done on my blog. It's Creative Criticality. It's spelled out down here below because it is sometimes hard to spell out. I do a lot of pop culture stuff there, but mostly I focus on Doctor Who, which I've been doing since 2014 with the Timestamps Project, where I've been going in order every episode of Doctor Who from the very beginning of the franchise all the way now to the end of the Tennant era this year and continuing on from there. It's a project that will never end.
Yeah, you're never gonna catch up ever. It's just not gonna happen.
You can find that at creativecriticality.net.
That's fantastic. Now, directly south of him is my friend Kristen. Kristen, please say hello and let everybody know about you.
Yes. Hi, guys. I'm Kristen Nedopak, the CEO of Magic Girl. I am the former showrunner and creator of a little award show called the Geeky Awards that maybe some of you have heard of. That is my former life as a producer. I am currently a fiction fantasy author, and I'm working on a book about magic. And by the way, I was 7 years old during 1984, so this is like right up my alley. I was just telling Sean, this was my golden era of being a child and watching cinema, so I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, it's true. Kristen and I were very close in age together. I was right around 6, almost 7. So yeah, we were right at the same age on this one. So I'm very much there with you. But to her screen right is going to be my buddy Gary. Gary, say hello and let them know about you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gary Mitchell. I'm a writer, reviewer, voice actor, podcaster, dashing debutante, and co-director of the American Sci-Fi Classics track at DragonCon here in Atlanta. And I turned 14 in 1984, so I'm the old one out.
Yes.
Oh, but that's okay. We still love you. You bring lots of good knowledge.
I do, because I was there.
You're a fine wine, sir. You just aged phenomenally well.
Okay. I was going to say I turned to vinegar, but that works too.
Oh, no,
you're
not
vintage.
At all. Yeah, you're vintage. You know what? You're not vinegar, you're vintage. Yeah, see, Kristen's on it. She's got you. And then finally, rounding out our panel is going to be Calvin. Calvin, please say hello to everybody and let them know about you.
So, Gary, really quick, you are not the old man here. I got a year up on you. I was in high school, so I'm the old one. Anyway, so my name is Calvin Watts III. I am from Rhode Island. Some people know me as that guy on TV. I am co-host of a cable access show that has been on the air. We're going to our 25th season called Sci-Fi Journal, which you can catch on YouTube. I'm a pop culture geek. I'm a movie fanatic. I love playing video games. I grew up and was born at the perfect time, and I'm into pretty much everything.
Awesome. And everybody is here because every single person on this panel had expressed an interest to be on this panel about 1984. And just to give you a little bit of history, this panel was originally the brainchild of Gary Mitchell, actually. He had come up with it with Joe Crow back in the day. No, he did. He came up with this, and they had it during the American Sci-Fi Classics track. Oh, God, what was it? About 7, 8 years ago now? Something like that?
Our first year was 2002. No, 2012. Sorry.
2012. So yeah, we're looking right about that because it was like the first year or two that you guys did it when we did the 1984 panel. And we got to sit down and we started talking about 1984. And I was so blown away at all the movies that I loved from this era, but also that just came out in this 12-month span. And I've always wanted to revisit this topic, not only because I love this year, but also because it really is striking how many movies that are considered like the bedrock of cinema have come out of this year. Some are more controversial than others, but regardless, this year had just produced so many movies. It is hard to argue that there's a more influential year in cinema, I would say, in the last 50, 60 years. I mean, does anybody here actually feel that 1984 is not one of the bedrock pieces of our current cinema culture?
The only one that's stronger to me is 82.
Oh, 82 is a good year.
That's what I've heard people argue that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So just to kind of give everybody an idea of just some of the movies that came out and what we were talking about. Now, for those of you who are interested as far as 1982 goes, you can look at movies like E.T. But when you look at 1984, just from the trailers that you saw as we started the show, we had stuff like Terminator was on there, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Karate Kid, Conan the Destroyer, Ghostbusters, Gremlins, The Last Starfighter, The Natural, The First Children of the Corn, which was actually pretty good, Splash, 1984, the actual movie, a flick that I think doesn't get nearly enough love, and I hope we get into this one a little bit, 2010, the year we made contact. Hell, the original short movie for Tim Burton, Frankenweenie, came out in 1984. Dune, the crazy-ass Dune movie, Red Dawn, Supergirl. I mean, we could go on and on and on about how many movies came out.
And we're going to.
And we're going to.
We got
and when we talk about all these movies, you're like, wait a minute, all that came out in 1984? Yeah. Like, it was a big year. But what I would like to do is, instead of going the way I introduced you, I'm going to start reverse. So I'll start with Calvin. But what is like your favorite movie from 1984? And don't worry about duplicate answers. We all love these flicks. So if you get to it first, It's okay. But Calvin, like, what is like the movie for you from 1984?
So I have two movies that come to mind,
Okay.
and I'm glad you mentioned Red Dawn, because Red Dawn is kind of important, because you mentioned Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and I don't know if you mentioned Gremlins or not.
I did.
Both movies by Steven Spielberg, and both very violent movies. And that's where the whole PG-13 rating came out. And Red Dawn was actually the first movie to come out, and it was a great ensemble cast. I mean, it is a very dated movie. But with Charlie Sheen and Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey, and I could just go on and on. I'm a big fan of like apocalyptic movies, end of the world movies, World War movies, and anything like that. And that just really struck me. And David Lynch's Dune is just absolutely bonkers. It has an all-star cast. I remember first watching it. A friend of mine in high school was like, "We got to go see this," and I had no idea what the hell was going on. I tried reading the book. And it really didn't strike me at first. And, I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. But it wasn't until it came out on like home video a few years later. And I was just happened to watch it for like the second time. And I'm like, all of a sudden, it just kind of clicked in my head. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what it meant in By the Book. So I ended up going back and just within the space of like 3 weeks, read every one of Frank Herbert's books. And Dune's become like one of my favorite like all-time movies.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And guys, feel free to jump in as far as this is concerned. But for me, Dune is one of those movies that I, as a kid, was fascinated by it because my dad had recorded it on, we did a lot of bootlegs back in the day, right? So he bootlegged it from a VHS. And I remember watching this movie at least 2 or 3 times a year. And he was obsessed with getting the extended cuts wherever he could. So he was one of those guys that would actually sit down, record the TV versions, which would have about an extra 45 minutes worth of content. And he would splice them in because he had 2 reel-to-reel VHS tapes. And he would splice in all the content where it was appropriate. So every once in a while, we get this weird magnetic warble where he jumped between the original movie and then what's on TV. But I watched like this massive, like seriously, my dad is the OG geek.
That's awesome.
Does he still have this? We need to see it.
So he actually, this was cool. When he let me see Dune for the first time, he and my mom had gone to the theater and they still had one of those old Dune booklets. Now it's completely fallen apart. I know it's actually worth a pretty penny these days if it was still in one piece, but he let me read the little handout that you got when you went to the theater. And then he let me watch the movie. And with that one, because he'd gotten all the extra material, it had that 10-minute pre-roll prologue where they have all the really nice paintings and they do the entire history of humanity up until the modern era in Dune. And it's always funny. I keep trying to find that version. And I came to realize years later that, it's my dad's special blend cut. that I'll never find anywhere else.
Oh my god!
So yeah, but it's still a great memory. Yeah, Dune is one of those. But I watched it at least 2 or 3 times a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
All the way until I left my parents' house, going out through 18 years old. So yeah. But that's a fantastic pick, absolutely. I love Dune. But what about you guys? What did you feel about Dune? Anybody have any overwhelming thoughts on it?
I love that 4-hour cut. One of the jewels in my VHS collection was I managed to grab that long extended cut when TBS, I think it was, did it over 2 days.
Right, yeah.
And I also had the handout from a theater which got destroyed in a move, and it still breaks my heart. But yeah, that movie is like taking drugs.
Yeah.
But I love it. It's great science fiction, and I am very depressed that we're not getting the new version until
a year from now,
at least.
Yeah, they're saying late 2021, early 22, I think now. So that kind of sucks. But at the same time, I'd rather wait, because the way I look at it is one of the things with big high concept sci-fi movies is they're always reaching a deadline, right? So if they're trying to get it out the door by X date, the special effects may not be quite where we want them to be. But if they have a whole nother year, they can just continue to spit polish that. Imagine what Peter Jackson could have done with a full another year on Lord of the Rings, some of those composite shots and stuff. I mean, it could really have just tightened up. Not that the end result wasn't amazing, but it would have just been that much better. So there is a little upside there, Gary. I mean, it's small, but it's still an upside.
Take what we can get.
Take what we can get. Absolutely. And we did have a comment from Rachel Howell about Patrick Stewart and pugs. What else do you need? Absolutely.
Gods, what a monster.
And I will give Lynch one big check in the plus column is the fact that he came up with the weirding way. They talk about it in the book, but the weirding devices and that whole gimmick of the voice was so freaking cool. And I like the fact that they it feels so much like Dune, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with Dune. The Fremen, if I remember correctly in the book, they do have a weirding way, but it's all about how they fight. It has nothing to do with
it's a funky martial art, basically.
Yeah, it's a funky martial art, so they're much more just very stylistic and savage fighters versus this crazy superpower, basically, that the Atreides clan has come up with that weird little neck jut thing. But it was so cool. How can you not love that movie? That excellent pick, Calvin. I love that. That is fantastic. Gary, how about you? What's a pick from 1984 that you absolutely love?
It is so tough to choose.
Well, you don't have to choose one. This is just our first round.
Yeah. For my first round, though, it's like there are a lot of heavy hitters, but I'm going to go with a bit of an odd choice, mainly because not only is it a good movie, it's a launching pad for two of the most creative, best minds in Hollywood, and that's Blood Simple, which gave us the Coen brothers.
Wow. You went to, that was actually, I think, the first Coen brothers movie that they directed, right?
Yep, it's the first one they directed. Right. The original trailer, they actually did it to the actual original trailer they did as the pitch to the studio to get funding actually had Bruce Campbell in it.
You gotta love the chin.
Yeah, Bruce Campbell running down the road with these car lights coming after him. But I mean, it's a twisty little thriller. It's a nasty little thriller.
Yeah.
But it's everything that we would come to expect from the Coen brothers. Great cast, great writing, inventive, and it's because it did so well. We went on to get Miller's Crossing, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Without this movie, we don't get some of the best films that have ever been made.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And definitely when you're looking at the entire resume of the Coen brothers, this is a movie that gets overlooked a lot. A lot of people look at some of their later work, but you have to look at where they started. And it really is very striking, especially when you're looking at all the cinema around it. You're looking at stuff like David Lynch, which, as we said, is very much an acid trip, or you're looking over here at Spielberg or Joe Dante with Gremlins and Temple of Doom, and it is very high cinema. Those are people who were such fans of movies, they dissected it and boiled it down. And here come the Coen brothers, and they have this kind of very raw, visceral feel to how they put their films together. And it definitely was a landmark piece. So, yeah, I think that's a really good choice. So, yeah, bravo. I like that one a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Kristen,
the reason I'm here.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
And then we go downhill. No,
not at all. There's no downhill in 1984.
I'm only joking.
You're going to have to try hard. Now, don't take this as a challenge, but you're going to have to try to find a movie where I'm going to go, really?
No, that's not true. No, I was in 1984. I was 7 years old, and I was a very strange child. So I definitely grew up. By the way, I love Dune. My mom raised me as a sci-fi fantasy geek. So we watch anything sci-fi, anything fantasy, anything related to vampires. That E.T. was the first movie I ever saw in the theater. So love that. But as a 7-year-old, very strange child, I kind of had a strange taste in movies. So I would say, even though The Karate Kid and Ghostbusters were really up there, and I just had so much fun with those movies, one of my absolute favorite movies of all time is Revenge of the Nerds. I watched that movie. And I mean, I've seen that movie 1,000 times. I had both of the leads at the Geeky Awards, and those were my favorite presenters at the show. I couldn't believe that they were on my stage at the show and people were screaming nerds. And when I watched that movie, I fell in love with Booger, and he became my alter ego. So this is how powerful this movie was. I would walk around in my underwear. I mean, I was like a 7-year-old girl. I would walk around in my underwear, and then I saw him in Better Off Dead, and I would be like picking my nose and snorting snow when I skied. I mean, really weird shit. So that was one of my favorite movies. But I will have to say, I do want to talk about a movie that I feel like was underrated.
Okay.
That was another one of my favorite movies that I watched all the time. And again, there's so many of them. Like Police Academy, don't even get me started. I've seen all the Police Academies. But Johnny Dangerously, I love that movie.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that was 1984. And I saw it. I was like, wow, that's another movie with Michael Keaton that I've seen, and Joe Piscopo that I've seen so many times. And I think it's so underrated. So,
well, because when you say Joe Piscopo, everybody goes, what? Like, they all kind of stop for a second. Like,
one time. Yeah, no. So those are some of my favorite movies. But of course, Last Starfighter, 16 Candles, Terminator. I mean, it's so hard to pick because there are just so many different types of movies where you've got like the 80s, kid in high school, and then you've got the Terminator, and then you've got Gremlins, and it's just, it's an amazing year. But
absolutely,
I'm going to go with Nerds.
Going back to Revenge of the Nerds, though, now that was a movie I used to watch, and it was funny because I had a conversation with my dad. I used to tell him, I was like, that's what's supposed to happen. Eventually, people are supposed to realize that nerds have value, right, Dad? And my dad, who was always a bit of a closet geek, he was a man who grew up in Brooklyn, who then went into the Air Force and then got married and had kids and settled down. And he was always big into comic books. He was always big into sci-fi, but he never wore it on his arm. He never was that guy who just went out and told people. If you became a friend of his, he would tell you, but it was not something that you could see from afar. It was very much, behind closed doors kind of thing. And so I was like, I'm going to be like these guys. I'm just going to be geeky all day long, every single day. And he was like, that's not how the world works. And I remember him kind of telling me that's not how the world works. So like, what do you mean? And he's like, you can't be like that. You just can't, if you want to succeed in this world, you have to work by their rules. And I'm like, I remember when my dad told me this at like 7, 8 years old, like my exact response in my kid brain was F that. And I made it a rule at that point that I was going to do everything I could to be the weirdest, kookiest, most flamboyantly geeky kid that I could be and never apologize for it. Much to his chagrin. And I was like, I'm going to find a way to make a living at it. I'm going to find a way to just be that kid all the time, every day. And what I realized was that there was an entire generation of people, just like you, Kristen, you're the same generation as me. We were all growing up at the same time saying, screw that. And we just decided to wear our geek love right on our heart and say, this is who we are. And I think it was because of movies like Revenge of the Nerds, which, okay, if you've never seen it, it is problematic in the lens of 2020. Okay.
Definitely. You have to understand, it was 1984.
It was 1984, and there are some very problematic things in this movie.
There's some scenes in there.
Oh man, there's some. There are consent issues in this movie. But there was also consent issues even for the nerds. I mean, those bullies were really they were horrible. But at the same time, understanding that it is an artifact of its time, and you kind of see where they were going. They were trying to be a little bit more tongue in cheek about it. There is something still very enjoyable about that movie. I mean, one of my favorite things is at the end when they're doing the talent show and they have the whole music off, right? And
that's the best part. That's
like the best part, right?
I mean, besides like the speech, but that's one of my favorite parts. I actually had a birthday party that was themed Revenge of the Nerds not that long ago, and then I dressed up as Poindexter, like with red hair and tried to make
seriously that silhouette of Poindexter. Where it's
my god! I wanted to play
the
violin because of him. I started playing the violin because of him when I was little and didn't really follow up with it, but it is so iconic.
It's funny. I actually played the violin until sophomore year of high school. Basically, from like 4th grade all the way till sophomore year, I played the violin. And I don't say that it was because of Revenge of the Nerds, but it might have been.
That all of those things get stored in our subconscious, right?
It does. But I never had the gumption to do that 4-foot tall spiked mohawk that he had. That crazy spiked mohawk. That was amazing. That was awesome. But yeah, that's a fantastic pick. But Michael, what about you? What would be your like go-to 1984 movie?
All right, so I'm going to preface this. I grew up in Utah, so when I see this movie that I'm about to talk about, this is it reminds me because it was the first film that I ever knew and recognized was filmed in my home state.
Okay.
I'm talking about Footloose.
Oh, yes!
Footloose. Man, that movie is pure 80s, but aside from like just being drenched in the 80s,
yes,
and the dancing, Kevin Bacon doing his thing, it also has some strong female characters. When I look back on it again, as an adult and with our current zeitgeist, Laurie Singer's character and Diane Weist's character are amazing. They push so much change in the community and they stand up for themselves. And I look at those the set pieces where they're doing all the different scenes and stuff, and I'm like, I know where that is. I know where that is. Right. The preacher's house, John Lithgow's character's house, and the church were right across the street from each other, and they're on the same street as the man who was effectively my grandfather growing up. Mm-hmm. And so you go visit him in Lehi, Utah, and you're like, I know that house, I know that church because I've seen them on the screen. And it's kind of sad now because we actually helped them move out of that house so they could actually renovate the area. The church is still standing, but the houses are all gone.
Right.
But it's just fun to watch that. He actually had a part in the movie as an extra, not realizing it. He was just at his job at the roller mill where where Ren is slinging the feed bags around, and he's in the back sweeping. And you're like, oh, there's Carl. You see him a couple times in the movie. It's just so much about home in that movie, and then also like your childhood at the same time. With the Kenny Loggins soundtrack and everything built into it. It's just so much like going home again.
Definitely. That soundtrack, I mean, the Footloose soundtrack, you cannot overstate the impact. I mean, a lot of people, when they think of like 80s movies, they think of like John Hughes, but like that Footloose soundtrack, whew. Yeah. I mean, there's so many, just as they would say today, bops. I mean, it's a really, really good soundtrack. If you've never gone through it, I mean, just the title song of Footloose is great. But then they have what was the song
when
that
Kenny
they played?
Loggins ruled the airwaves?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But what was the song? I forget the name of the song where they're doing Chicken with the Tractors. What was the song that they were playing during that scene?
Holding Out for a Hero?
Yes, the Holding Out for a Hero, which, in my opinion, was more appropriately served in Short Circuit 2 when Johnny Five is chasing down the criminals. But yes, I think that was the first time I had ever heard that one. But yeah, God, I love that soundtrack. Yeah, Footloose. I didn't even think about Footloose. That is a great pull.
Yes.
See, you guys are pulling movies that I wasn't thinking of, and I'm like, yeah, that one too. Yes. See, the stack just keeps growing.
That needed to be in your preview. I mean, come on, next time. But with Michael dancing, because I really want to know if Michael, you danced to that because that was your hometown. Was there like any dancing going on in your hometown in Iowa, or was it just filmed there?
Well. Yeah, it was a pretty conservative place. Utah's a pretty conservative place, and it's grown since then, obviously. But I don't think there's any cities like the one that he moved to where it's outlawed to dancing, and they don't do any book burnings or anything else. But there's still people who dance. I'm not much of a dancer, but I mean I can share dance. But other than
that, really.
So are you the best? Are you the best friend where they have to put the helmet on the head and they have to beat the rhythm into you, kind of, like you have to learn how to. I can learn how to dance.
Wait, that's a thing.
I see that movie, and that would be me in 1984.
I know.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, well, Eric, what about you? What would be one of your pulls from 1984? Did we lose Eric?
He might be frozen. I was thinking Eric's got this.
He did. Like he was like super like, oh no, we lost him.
He was really into Footloose.
There he is. Hi, Eric.
Eric.
Are you back?
That was weird.
That was weird.
I hope so. Can you hear me?
See, John
It was Skynet.
We got you. Yes, it was okay. Honestly, I thought you were doing like the best owl impression where you're just.
It's like he was thinking really hard about that movie choice.
He was.
Eric's actually really into Footloose.
Really into Footloose. He was like, "Yeah, man, I gotta go Footloose." But Eric, what about you? Like, what's a great movie for you from 1984?
Okay, so as I joked, I was born in '87, but as a kid, science fiction and comedy were my things, since and horror to a lesser extent. But I can remember so many times where me and my best friend as little kids would be running around with our proton packs catching ghosts whenever we got the chance, both because of the movie and the cartoon. So of course I have to go with Ghostbusters.
Yes.
Which, for the time and just in general, it is a highly innovative film for actually all three genres, for science fiction, horror, and comedy, because nothing at that time had really combined those three genres in the way that Reitman and Ramis did. And it's such a brilliant film with top tier comedians who were the biggest names in comedy at the time. And just everything about it is amazing from the beginning with from the library scene to some of the most quotable lines of all time. I mean, if someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
You say yes. That's what you do. Yep. And again, another amazing soundtrack, right? I mean, the Ghostbusters soundtrack is just absolutely fantastic. But Ghostbusters had one up on almost every movie that we've talked about prior to this, because it also had one of those logos that has become so iconic that we all you see it and that Ghostbusters logo, that ghost with the no symbol is just so iconic that it is absolutely fantastic. Before we go any further about Ghostbusters, though, I want to go around real quick. I want to know who your favorite Ghostbuster is. Rapid fire, Calvin. Who's your favorite Ghostbuster?
Harold Ramis.
Harold Ramis. Okay, Egon. Fantastic. Gary,
Egon,
how about you?
Yeah.
Venkman, man.
Venkman. Okay, Kristen.
Yeah, I'm Bill Murray all the way. Every Bill Murray movie, he's just my idol.
Fair enough. Michael.
Yeah.
I grew up loving Venkman, but I'm a Ray guy now.
You're a Ray guy now. And how about you, Eric?
I'm actually with Michael on that one. I'm a Ray guy.
Wow.
Wait.
Yes.
I'm going to alter my answer to say, but my favorite character was Sigourney Weaver. So.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
Say that, okay.
My favorite Ghostbuster is, and always has been, Winston Zeddemore.
Yes.
I have
Winston.
always. Ernie Hudson is amazing.
Yes.
I love him. But the reason why I love Winston Zeddemore was because he's the guy who comes in halfway through the movie after the Ghostbusters have seen some serious shit, right? Like as he says later on, I've seen some shit that would make you go white. And he's trying to explain to people just how messed up all this ghostbusting really is. And he's the everyman. And for me, I always like to root for the everyman, the person who isn't necessarily the specialist, but is the guy who just kind of gets dropped in it by accident. Those are the characters I tend to gravitate towards. So for me, I was always a fan of Winston, which is, I think, interesting because everybody is either Camp Egon, Camp Ray, or Camp Venkman. And I almost never hear, Winston. And I'm like, come on, there's got to be some Winston out of here, like somebody. And it's okay. I was hoping out of the six of us, I'd get one more Winston night, but that's all right. I am alone in my castle.
No, Winston's awesome. I mean,
yeah, he is. They're all awesome.
They're all awesome. I mean,
you made us pick.
I did. But it is also one of these situations where it's like pick your least favorite piece of pizza. It's still pizza. It's still good.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is a slight.
Okay.
I still wonder what it would have been like though if we had gotten the original casting idea but unfortunately various things happened with Eddie Murphy as Winston and John Belushi as Venkman.
Yeah. But I from what I understand, a lot of the lines,
a whole different movie, I think.
Yeah. It would have been. And from what I understand, a lot of the really humorous lines that they gave to other characters was originally given to Winston. So I can't see Eddie Murphy playing the everyday working man kind of character, but having some of these zingers.
Oh, so I think Well, the thing I saw in an interview, they were all on Oprah for when Ghostbusters 2 was coming out. Right. And someone asked Reitman, why did you give Venkman all the funny lines? And he went, we gave Bill all the lines we didn't think would work.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist, So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Bill Murray is amazing in this movie. As a kid, I loved Bill Murray. But I always liked Winston. I just like Winston because he wasn't the crackpot. He wasn't the jokester. He was the guy who was taking it very seriously. And as a kid, I took Ghostbusters very seriously. I was like, oh, this is
I actually didn't know that Eddie Murphy was potentially going to be cast in that role. And now that I think about it, like he's such a powerful actor that the way that we have it now, it feels like such a balanced cast where it's an ensemble and they're all really important. They all work well. I feel like if Eddie Murphy was in there, he would have just been like, it would have been like the Eddie Murphy show, like he really is that type of guy that he's the lead and it's about him and he's amazing. I love Eddie Murphy, but I feel like it might have created an imbalance where
they would have needed Belushi to balance him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If you had Belushi, it would have worked. But then you wouldn't have Bill Murray as Venkman, which like honestly, God, I don't know if Belushi could have pulled off some of the stuff that Bill Murray did. And I have mixed feelings about Bill Murray. I like Bill Murray in a lot of movies, but I also feel like in a lot of times he's not acting. Like sometimes I feel like he really is that kind of a jerk, but like I don't want to believe it. So
he's just really good with dry humor. Okay,
maybe he's just really good with dry humor. But if you had Jim Belushi in it, like I don't know if Jim Belushi would have brought exactly what was needed to the Venkman role.
I agree with that. I really feel like that dry humor was exactly what sold those lines.
Yeah, but no, I mean, Ghostbusters is an amazing pick. I mean, absolutely. So excellent pick, Eric. For my first one, I go straight to my number one S tier. Nothing will ever beat it in my mind. I still show this movie to people because it is so underrated. People do not watch this movie enough, and it's because they just don't know about it. It bombed at the box office, but it is, in my mind, one of the most perfect movies ever made.
Wait, can you guess?
Go ahead. What do you think it is?
The Last Starfighter.
The Last freaking Starfighter.
Yes.
That is exactly what we're talking about.
That's because I'm psychic.
My God.
I knew you were gonna say it.
I could have told you,
question.
because the second this panel came up, I was like, yeah, I know exactly what Sean's going with.
Such a good movie.
Exactly where I'm going. By the way, my
movie.
wife, Laura, wants to know what years was Blues Brothers. If I remember correctly, it was 1980. Yeah, it was 1980. Yeah. But no, but if you've never seen The Last Starfighter, let me give you the quick elevator pitch so that way you can go out and rent this immediately. In a small town in the mountains, there's a guy by the name of Alex. And Alex basically is the local handyman. He helps his mom. He wants to go to college, but he can't get financial aid because he's just that poor. And he realizes his life is never going to go anywhere. The only thing that he has any fun doing is playing this game that's really high-end and polished called The Last Starfighter. And one night, because people are so bored in this town, he actually breaks the high score record on this cabinet, and it becomes a little phenomenon in their town of like 40 people. And so it's like, oh my God, that was amazing. This is the best night of my life. Oh my God. And after everybody went home, he's sitting out looking at the stars, and a car pulls up. And a man comes out and introduces himself, and he says, hey, I would like to talk to you about a business proposition. Are you interested? Alex says, sure. And the next thing Alex knows is that he's in space meeting aliens, and he found out that this was actually a flight simulator for their #1 class of starship known as a starfighter. And they need him to help defend their frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada. So this kid, who's 18 years old, is like, you said what? And he is thrown into the deep end of an intergalactic battle, and then it gets worse. And I can't even tell you why it gets worse, but trust me when I say the makeup effects of this movie are fantastic. The acting is top-notch. Everything about this flick is awesome, and it is one of the first movies to use heavy CG for all of their special effects.
Yes.
So all of their starfighter battles are these. It's very dated by today's standards, but it's still slick. It
still
still
holds up
works.
though as a
It
movie.
holds up really good. Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a movie that I would love to see them just redo the CGI, re-release it as is, but just redo the CGI.
Oh man, I would give all the money for that so much. And actually, Jessa was just saying Robert Preston. Period. Yes, Robert Preston kills in this movie. But one of the great things about this flick that we've all seen that movie where there's the hero out of water and he's struggling against his destiny to become whatever they need him to be. They have a B plot in this movie, and the B plot is literally called Beta. And Beta is one of the greatest inventions you have ever seen. It is what they call a synthetic. It's basically a decoy. And what happens is that he shakes the hand of Beta, and Beta then becomes him. And so he's a robot that is basically living Alex's life in the little town. And that's when all of the monsters.
So people don't know he's missing.
So people don't know that he's missing, and monsters start coming trying to kill Alex, thinking Beta is really him. And there's a whole B plot where basically Beta's screwing up people's houses and messing up their plumbing. This movie is funny. It's smart. It's got a lot of pathos in it. The music, there's no pop music. It's all just wonderfully orchestrated. And if I remember correctly, it's not a John Williams score. Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't think so.
I think it's somebody else. Yeah, I don't think John Williams did the score for that. But it has a Williams-esque kind of sweeping score. But it's such a good movie. And nobody, like outside of the people who caught it like in theaters or maybe were in the VHS generation have seen it. My friend Christina.
It was Craig Stefan was the person, and he wanted to go. Yeah, he was the composer, and he wanted to go bigger than Star Wars.
I think he succeeded in a lot of ways. That soundtrack was just so good. But my friend Christina, about 10 years ago, I was describing this movie to her, and she's about 10 years younger than me. And I said, have you ever seen it? She said, no. And I was like, sit down. And I made her watch it. And it's one of her favorite movies now. She was like, oh my God, that movie's amazing. I mean, it is one of those flicks. And if you've never seen it, you've got to check it out. You can rent it over on Amazon. I don't think it's streaming anywhere right now, so I think you have to rent it or buy it. But it's worth whatever.
It's worth purchasing.
Yes. It is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I've actually showed a few people. I was like, you got to see Labyrinth. You've got to see Dark Crystal. And I've given people like a bunch of those old movies that they've never seen, and that is one movie that every single person says, okay, I've never heard of this, and it was my favorite in the entire list of things that you gave me to watch. So it definitely holds up.
Yeah, and the worst part about it is that because it did so poorly in the theaters, it was set up for a sequel. Like they were ready to go, and we've never gotten a sequel to it. Now the upside to that is the man who wrote the movie, who owns the rights to the movie, will not let them remake it or sequel it unless he signs off on the script. And he is extremely protective over that piece of intellectual property. From what I understand, like in the last year or two, people have been trying to.
I was curious about that. It's like people are scouting for things to remake, and that's such an amazing movie that
I would love to see it remade.
Curious.
Yeah.
He's holding on to that.
I'd love to see it as a Disney Plus series.
Oh, definitely. Yes. A series would be amazing.
A miniseries or a sequel. Like, I mean, we're coming up on what, 40 years since now? So like,
I mean, we're at 36 right now. So
yeah. So I mean, why not see what happens to him 40 years down the road? I mean, he's probably got to train a new whole legion of starfighters and everything else. So like, that'd be an amazing like coming of age for the new kid or something else, you know?
Yeah. I think the only downside to that is Lance Guest. I think he suffered Bell's palsy or possibly a stroke. One of his hands has atrophied into kind of like a bit of a claw. So that's
into the character.
Yeah, I mean, they could work it into the character, like, it's a battle wound or something. But that would be like the only thing. I don't know if he's really up for making that into like that's his private life. He may not want that to be on Front Street. But if you see him in interviews, he very kind of carefully kind of tucks his pocket away, and every once in a while he'll bring it out. You'll see it's kind of like an immobile hand. But God, I would love to see Lance Guest back as Alex Rogan. Like, all the money. I would just throw money at this.
Alternatively, animated. Go animated. Make it an animated miniseries.
Yeah, I could see animated. Yeah,
and for me, I loved Greg. He one of my favorite moments in cinema. Like, it's the wave of enemies coming in. It's gonna be a slaughter. That's the spirit.
No, our slaughter. And then what I love is at the very end when they're trying to introduce Greg to the family. And he's going through and he's saying hello to everybody, and he's just like he's trying so desperately to not scare the crap out of them. But as soon as he gets off the ship and the people in the town see him, they're like, "Oh my God, it's a monster!" And he gets almost British. He's like, "Monster," he gets all uppity about it. And but when he meets Alex's little brother Lewis, that is like one of those great moments. He's like, "Hey, I'm Lewis," and he's like, "I've heard of you," and he's like, "See, I'm famous." Just everything about that movie fires. I cannot just. I'm sorry, I'm having the Last Starfighter moment here. I'm just like,
no, but you're promoting an amazing movie that everyone needs to see.
It's so good.
Absolutely, yeah.
I want to go watch it again.
I know, right? So we have about 25 minutes left, so we got about enough time to do one more round. So let's go ahead. We'll start again with Calvin. So Calvin, what would be another great movie for you that you love from 1984?
Oh man, there are just so many. There's a lot of stuff we haven't touched on. Purple Rain, Prince semi, biography is just an absolute awesome movie. But there are a lot of cult classics that came out that what are considered cult classics today. A couple that come to mind that I love: Night of the Comet.
Night of the Comet, yes.
Yeah. Night of the Comet is out there, and then Buckaroo Banzai. It was 1984.
Was Buckaroo Banzai? You're right. It was 1980.
Yep.
Another one. Buckaroo Banzai and Okay, so Calvin, I think for people who have not seen it, because you want to talk about a deep cut movie, this one, first off, it's got everybody in it. And I mean, everybody. Hold on. If I don't do this, the wife is literally going to like lose her noodle. Laura would like honorable mention for Chud, which so she's like, "Come on, Chud." So I had to give that one to her. But no, Chud is a great one. But yeah, Buckaroo Banzai, when I say it has everybody in it, Calvin, if you remember who's in it, tell them who's in it and give them like the elevator pitch of what this movie's supposed to be.
It is just so crazy. And of course now my mind's drawn a blank, but I know Jeff Goldblum's in it, and Peter Weller stars as Buckaroo Banzai, and it's John Lithgow's the bad guy. And it's just absolutely, like you said, it's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, Chris Lloyd is in it. This was going to be my pick. I'll go with another one. But yeah, it's
no, go right ahead.
Yeah, please jump in. Yeah,
it's basically a homage to the great pulp adventurers of the 30s and the 40s in the style of Doc Savage or all the intrepid adventurers who are multidisciplinarians. I got that word out. I'm impressed.
Yeah, you did. You nailed it. Yeah.
Because Buckaroo Banzai is half Chinese, if I'm not mistaken, American, who is a musician, rock star, neurosurgeon, inventor, engineer who goes on adventures around the world with the Blue Blazers as his support team. And they're all there. Clancy Brown is in it as one of them. Like I said, Jeff Goldblum is a cowboy. It was supposed to be the start of a series. I mean, one of my other favorite moments in the movies is the Buckaroo Banzai's team is at a rock concert and they're in the middle. And all of a sudden he goes, "Wait, someone's crying."
Yes.
And that really is what kicks off the plot.
Yeah, it really is. That is like the big pro. Like at that point, you're in like this weird comic book movie. He just went through a freaking mountain, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, somebody's crying in the audience. And he sings her like a nice little like soft song. Yeah, no, Buckaroo Banzai is a weird flick though. I mean, but it works in its weirdness because it's kind of like one of those movies that assumes that that there's 7 movies that came before it that you've never seen, but it's okay because you don't need to see the first 7 movies to get this flick. But it's a very weird movie, but I kind of like that. I like it when they just assume that you'll get it eventually. So no, I definitely dig that. But we were talking about other people who are in it. You had mentioned the fact that John Lithgow was in it, and Christopher Lloyd was in it. Lewis Smith is one of those guys. Is Perfect Tommy. He was also in what was that? Where he died and he had to give it. He was like the Heavenly Kid, which is another great '80s movie. Yeah. Clancy Brown was in this as well. Vincent Schiavelli, who is like one of like the great character actors of the 80s. He's got this great, and I hate to say it like this because it sounds like an insult, but it's not. But he's got this great melted face kind of look to him. Very droopy. And I love that. Jonathan Banks, who is really famous these days from Better Call Saul and from Breaking Bad. He plays Frank from that series. He's in this. I mean, there are so many great actors in here. Another one I like to call out to a lot because people forget about him is Carl Lumbly. He plays one of the what was it? The 9th dimension, 8th dimension. What dimension did he go?
The 9th dimension.
Was it the 9th? He was one of the 9th dimension aliens. And you actually get to see Carl Lumbly because normally he has short hair or he has a bald head.
No, it was the 8th dimension. Sorry, it was
the 8th dimension. But in this one, he's got like full on dreadlocks. So like down to his this movie is very, very weird. Rastafarian insectoid aliens from the 8th dimension.
Yeah, we have the Earth gets caught in the battle between the red lectoids and the black lectoids because when Buckaroo Banzai developed his overthruster to go through the mountain, he punched a hole in that dimension, and the red lectoids who've been trapped on Earth after the civil war between the 2 lectoid factions can now try to go home. Yeah. When are we going? Home. When are we going? Real soon.
Real soon. But by the way, this movie is meant to be tongue-in-cheek. It's meant to be fun. So if that sounds completely ridiculous and you're like, this sounds just so dumb, yes, you got it. Go watch this movie.
I mean, Sean, no matter where you go.
Yes.
No matter where you go. There you are.
There you are. Oh, sorry.
Don't leave me hanging.
I was waiting for you to finish it, man. Somebody called my name, and I was like, "What? Who? What? Huh? What?"
I mean, the end credits are what hooked me. Like, seeing that number at the end where the credits are rolling. Normally, in most movies, fade to black, and this one it's like a marching dance number.
But they're walking in. It's so funny. They call it a river, even though it's basically just an aqueduct. But they're walking in the L.A. River. And Kristen, you lived in LA for a long time, so it's just that concrete,
not really a river.
It's not really a river. It's just a concrete, basically gulch, But they're walking down that, and they're all just kind of teaming up, and that's when you realize how big this cast is because, the Buckaroo Banzai's crew is like 12 people. And so they all have their hero shot, So you have Jeff Goldblum as the cowboy, and he's come strutting up all Jeff Goldblum and whatnot. And this movie, I love this movie.
It's a crime we never got the sequel, and there was talk for ages of they were going to do the World Crime League, and Jackie Chan was going to be the bad guy.
Didn't they do a book finally? Didn't they finally do like a book or some kind of pulp novelization or something of it?
They did a novelization, and the novel is written as if it's real. This is the documentation of what actually happened.
Okay.
Footnotes and everything.
Fair enough. Well, Calvin, excellent pick. Gary, he took yours. Did you have a backup, or do you want to pass?
Oh, I've got like 10 backups.
He's got a list.
Yeah, there's one I'm saving for Sunday's panel of the best movies you haven't seen. So come back for that.
Beautiful.
but it's a hard call because everybody wants to talk about Terminator, everybody wants to talk about Gremlins, everybody wants to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street, but my first backup is going to be a fun little movie called Romancing the Stone.
Yes!
Yes!
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you said that.
Yeah. It taps into the Indiana Jones pulp adventure. It's a wonderful romance. It's got a perfect cast.
Oh, those two.
Yeah. Kathleen Turner, Michael Douglas, Danny DeVito. I mean, it's just a beautiful little adventure romance mixture. I didn't like the sequel as much, unfortunately, but this one is it's one of those perfect little movies. It came out of nowhere. Nobody expected it. I just love the story of Turner being, the writer who writes about all these adventures and suddenly getting sucked into one.
No, definitely. Romancing the Stone is a fantastic movie. But Kristen, you seem to have a very strong reaction to that one. Do you have anything you want to add on to that?
God.
Please.
Well, I mean, I'm like a 7-year-old girl at this point. So I'm watching, I had a huge crush on Jeff Goldblum. I had a huge crush on Johnny Depp. That's why I watched Nightmare on Elm Street. I was like, scary as shit, but Johnny Depp. But these movies, these romantic movies, I mean, we just talked about Titanic a minute ago, which, by the way, is back there and behind Sean.
Right, well, that was the pre-show, but yes, we were talking about my wife's Rose DeWitt doll back here.
Yes. So as a writer and as like I've always been I'm going to say an adventurous and also romantic. When growing up, I was watching these movies, and again, it's the strong female character. She is not she is even more powerful than Michael Douglas. I love Kathleen Turner. I love War of the Roses, like every single movie that they've done, and I still love Jewel of the Nile. I know it's not as good as Romancing the Stone, but those two together had such chemistry. And I just remember growing up and watching this, and I think she made me want to be a travel, just an adventure. Like I wanted to go out and I wanted to be a travel photographer. I wanted to work for National Geographic when I was growing up, because I would see these movies like this where these women were out there. And also I know it's kind of cheesy, but watching something like Crocodile Dundee, it's like these women are out there and they're adventuring and they're doing this great work. But this was one of those movies that had always stuck out to me as one of my favorite romances, because it's not about the romance, it's about the adventure. And again, like just such a great actress. Both of them are amazing, but such a strong female lead. And I always appreciated that growing up.
Yeah, well, and I think one thing that you could say about Romancing the Stone and a lot of those other movies that you just mentioned is the fact that there really became this trend of let's introduce a woman who is absolutely within her element and is a strong, absolutely in control woman who in the United States, nobody's going to mess with her. Like she just dominates everybody. She's got to go out to the cut 'em up like safari to find people who are on her level, right? So no other man except for Michael Douglas, who's deep, in the jungles, could remotely level up to anybody who could be her equal. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic, because it's not that, she needs rescuing. It's that literally the only person who can even catch her attention is somebody who is going to be that far more superlative than your everyday Joe that you would meet in Brooklyn or out there in Detroit. Yeah. So there is something really cool about that, because it doesn't mean that she's helpless and waiting for you. And honestly, you could trace that all the way back to characters like Princess Leia in Star Wars. Like when they're trying to rescue her, she takes the gun, like, get out of my way. You know what I mean? She's making sure they rise to her level, not the other way around. And that's what I like about those movies. But yeah, Romancing the Stone is freaking fantastic. I think
I might watch that tonight. I mean, I've been actually, it's on my list of I've been meaning to want to go back and watch it. To kind of go back and watch it again? Mentioned it. I was like, wait, okay, this is perfect.
Yeah, there you go. Well, see, we're helping people with their Friday night entertainment. So there you go. Kristen, we are to you now. So what movie would you pick?
Ooh, absolutely. Okay, so I know we've got a few minutes, so I'm going to
It's okay. You know what? We're just going to run long. This is our last show tonight, so let's just keep going.
All right. I want to give a runner-up to, again, Very Strange Child. I was super into music, and I've got to say that Spinal Tap is one of the funniest movies ever. And so, anytime I go back and watch that, I just laugh my ass off. So I love that movie. I love Purple Rain. But I do have to say that something we haven't mentioned, and I know this is probably on everyone's top list, but The Neverending Story. I mean, I just watched that recently, and it still made me cry. just the story of this boy reading the story. And I'm actually telling a story right now. I mean, I was watching this and I was like, wait, so the boy is telling a story, but it's really about him and he's in the story. And I was like, wait, I'm writing a story about a girl who's really me in the story. And I just felt so related to it. And growing up, I mean, I wanted to be Atreyu. I didn't really want to be the princess. Sorry, princess, but I wanted to be Atreyu. I just absolutely love this story so much. And again, because I was so infatuated with going on these adventures into these other worlds. And I just felt like this movie was so, and it was sad when the horse dies. Oh my gosh, I was even crying like, 40
I mean,
years
honestly,
old.
that's where
And
that's where the part of me who always gets hurt as a kid is really mad at you right now, because it takes a while to get over that Artek's death. And I'm okay, and now you brought it all back, and I'm just like, shit.
Then I had to rewatch it. I literally watched this like a few weeks ago again. It was like, oh, never a new story. And so that story has always been so, and Falkner, of course. Yes, of course.
That's a lot of us. Yes.
And
Rachel's
then
100% right.
Even when the knight goes through and gets zapped, I mean, just these little things where it's this children's story, but there's some violence in there that really does kind of shake you up. And the nothing was so scary to me at that point in time. So yeah, I just want to throw it out there to the Neverending Story. That's just still a classic to me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, as a kid, I mean, we were the right age because, when that movie came out, like Bastian's what? I think he's 8 or 9 in that movie. Yeah. So I was like 6, or so when I saw that movie the first time. Yeah. So we're right at that right age when we see Bastian, and I absolutely that movie traumatized me. And I mean, Artek's was a bad way to go, but the thing, and actually, Rachel just said it. That moment right there. When they're describing where they're describing how the nothing is taking people, and they say, "Oh, well, you mean it just goes to the emptiness?" He's like, "No, it's just nothing." And he goes, "And I had my friends in my hands, and they're such big hands, strong hands." And he just and it's a big freaking animatronic guy in a suit, rock monster, and you're just like, "No, his friends are dead." Like you just messed up over this movie. And this was for kids. Like this was a kids movie.
And when I went back and rewatched it again, I felt like it was so relatable to today, and not that we had this nothing coming through, but it's just this concept of I can't save people. They have to save themselves. Like people have to believe in magic. People have to believe in this world for it to exist. And it really got to be. I mean, I was like bawling at the end. It's like, we have to do better. Yeah.
Okay. So, what did you ever figure out what her name was? The princess? Did you ever decide what her name was supposed to be?
Oh my gosh, I can't.
Because I've never been able to figure out what her name is. It was the nothing. Is that what it was?
I said, well, there goes the nothing.
Right?
You're right. The princess was just kind of there at that point. I mean, I was young. I was watching Atreyu and Bastian and Falkner and the princess. I was like, yeah, whatever.
Okay, so Donald says it was supposed to be Moonchild. But whatever the hell Bastian said in the rain was not Moonchild. It was like,
it was his mom's name, and who knows what his mom's name was. Some 80s name. Come on. It's going to be like Tiffany or something. Jennifer.
I don't know what it was, but, but okay, if I remember correctly, though, the original book was written by somebody who was Danish or German, right?
Ooh, I don't know. That's a good question.
Something like
Somebody
that.
in the comments.
So maybe, but I want to say it was either Danish or German. So maybe it's just like some really long Slavic name that Bastian had in the back of his head that he just belted out.
Like, we don't know. Lord. Just scream something.
Yeah. Here's another one. Here we go. We have it's clearly princess. So there you go. Well, it's empress. She was actually an empress. I think I said princess earlier, but the childlike empress.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a good movie too. But yeah, that movie messes you up like a lot.
Yeah.
That and the when you go to see the oracles and the booby sphinxes are going to shoot you with their laser eyes. I was like,
that's what I'm saying. They killed the knight. He went through, and then you're like, he's gonna die. They're gonna shoot. Yeah, it was. There were so many kind of slightly creepy special effects back then that. You look back, I mean, even watching The Dark Crystal, I still get freaked out watching, it's not 1984, but I still get freaked out watching the Skeksis.
Totally.
It's like, I can't handle them.
We've gotten so over, we don't want to scar the children. Look, we used to scar children like crazy.
My
that was what you did.
My parents didn't even watch the movie beforehand. They're like, "Oh, movie, set you in front of the TV and you watched it, and like whatever happened happened." And you needed therapy afterwards, but nobody talked about it.
Well, I mean, I think there's something very cathartic for kids. I mean, there's a reason why the original Grimm's fairy tales were very dark, and sometimes they were happy and sometimes they weren't. And I think that this was the beginning of the end of the era where people trusted parents and children to understand and to have these kind of conversations. I think as we got into the later 80s and into the 90s, it started to become Hollywood's problem to parent the kids instead of creating these stories and allowing the parents to say, maybe, this may not be appropriate for you.
Think of the children.
Hold on. This is just funny. Booby Sphinxes sounds like a mammogram machine.
About glitter pillows.
Right. Before we started, Kristen was like, "Oh, let me get my glitter pillows out." And we're like, "Okay, we're clearly on the late night show tonight."
Speaking of, I don't want to take up more time, but speaking of movies that traumatized me in 1984, Children of the Corn, holy shit. That movie, I couldn't even handle life after watching that. I don't even know if I finished it. It was so disturbing to me because it's what you don't see, the
God in the corn. Yeah, the God in the corn is a really creepy concept.
Wow.
He who walks behind the rows.
It's a very creepy concept. But then you get to, we have your woman, Outlander. We have your woman.
Okay, for every high, there is a low. I'm not going to say there's not, okay?
High!
But I think by and large, though, Children of the Corn definitely taps into that fear that I think a lot of adults have, which is what if kids figured out that they were much more powerful and they had this power and they had this intelligence at a young age and were then driven by a dark force. I think that's when you look at, look at Stephen King's Graveyard Shift, back in the 70s where you have the kid that's all, was it Graveyard Shift? No, Salem's Lot. I'm sorry, Salem's Lot, where you have the kid just knocking on the door, right, or knocking on the window, and there's just an evil malevolence behind the child's eyes. I mean, it
creepy kids matters. Are creepier than creepy adults. That's the thing.
It really is. So
that child screaming.
If I could plug for a second, next week's quarantine panel is Evil Children. So if you want to talk about that next Thursday night on the Classic Track Facebook page.
Yes, absolutely. Go to Facebook, go to the American Sci-Fi Classics page, and you can watch Evil Children next Thursday. So if you like stuff like this, definitely. Gary and Joe, who are the heads of that track, they're doing this once a week now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So every week you'll be able to see a new panel all the way until we get to DragonCon 2021. So it'll help smooth over the loss of any convention scene. So if you're hungry for more stuff, that's always good. But let's get back on target. We have 3 more choices. We have Michael, Eric, and then myself. So Michael,
I want to add really quick.
Look at you! You just shove it in.
I did. No, but I googled it that it was Moonchild. It was Moonchild. He did yell out Moonchild. So I think we needed to answer that question for everybody.
I don't believe. He said it earlier. Like I will give it to Donald, but I don't believe it.
I Google it. I'm trusting Google. I'm not sure.
I think Google lies. I think we're all having one of those. What is it? We're having a mandala effect. I think we all think it's one thing, but it's really not. It's really
yeah. But what's his mom's name? What's mom's name? Moonchild.
Yeah, his mom's name Moonchild. She wasn't born. Like she was. No, I don't buy it.
Maybe it's Moonchild in Polish, and that's why it sounds weird.
Oh, maybe. Okay, so Michael, we have derailed in front of you many times tonight. I am sorry, but it is your turn. What would be your final pick for a great movie from 1984?
Oh, this one gets dumped on a lot because it's an odd numbered film, and people think that they're all bad when they have odd numbers.
I know where you're going.
Yep, Star Trek III: The Search for Spock.
Yes.
And the reason I love this film is because it talks about brotherhood and family at its core, and B, it breaks all the rules.
Yeah.
Right. It breaks every one of the canon rules. Like they steal a starship.
Yep.
They blow up that starship. They talk about resurrecting a main character who died. Like, when did Spock ever have the ability to transfer his spirit around?
Right.
And all that didn't matter.
His Katra.
Yeah. His Katra. But it didn't really matter because it was such a film about bringing this family back together that had been shattered. And seeing your main characters like Kirk and McCoy, driven down low like that. And then they have to come back together. They have to fortify themselves and go out and make this one final mission to save their best friend.
Yeah.
It's a very touching film. And the one thing I really, really love about it is James Horner's score. With that whole stealing the Enterprise cue, like if you listen to the music, really, it's James Horner doing James Horner. But when they're coming up on the space dock doors and they're not opening yet, and you're getting the tension built up, like, are they going to make it? Are they going to burst through the doors and destroy the Enterprise in space dock? And then the theme kicks into high gear when the doors open, and it actually brings in something he hadn't had in that or in that piece before then, is big poundy drums, like driving the bass in there. And it's like, okay, this is triumphant. Like, these guys are going to make it. You know, it's very heroic film. I absolutely love this film.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely dead on for that one. And I think this movie doesn't get enough credit. I mean, there are things that are cringy, I admit. You know, the Genesis device planet kind of blowing up so quickly after it's been formed. I get it. It's literally the entire idea of Genesis being the reason they're able to bring back Spock is a really big MacGuffin. I'll give them that. But, you know, this is where we're introduced to the idea of Pon farr, really. You know, they had mentioned it, I believe, in one episode before because Spock had gone through stuff. But we really got to see Pon farr on a much more visceral level, and how it really works between a male and a female, because, of course, you have that whole moment with Saavik, and she's, you know, doing that weird thing with the fingers and stuff, and how you're able to calm each other down. That was huge. You get Christopher Lloyd as, in my opinion, the first true quintessential Klingon of the modern era. Like, oh my God. Like, and he's like people forget that's when we get that's like the first real Klingon that we get, and he crushes it.
Yeah.
He was John Larroquette.
Yeah, and John Larroquette as well. Christopher Lloyd is Kruge. Like, it was amazing to watch a Klingon captain, like, you know, the first gunner screws up. He's like, you know, he's like, forget about it. You're dead. You're executed for failing. And then the next time they need the gunner to do something, replacement gunner in his chair, target engines only. You know? Target them only.
But, you know, you also have, of course, you have the wonderful brotherhood and camaraderie, because at this point you have the entire Star Trek series. At this point, you've lost Spock. You've had the first two movies. You're now in the third one, and so you have this hole in the family that they're trying to fix, like you said, and they really play up on that. You know, they play up on the fact that Bones is adamantly pissed that Spock had the gumption to jump inside of his head, but at the same time he's like, I'm going to get your butt out of my head just so I can kick it. You know, like, I mean, which is what you do to a family member, right? Like that's how you are. Like, you know, I want to save you just so I can kick your ass. You know, like,
this is his revenge for all those arguments he lost.
You know, you have finally the Excelsior, which, of course, later on, Sulu actually does become the captain of, which I always think is hilarious. Like, if you were Sulu and you saw it break down on its first day, would you ever willingly be the captain of that ship? Like,
only after having Scotty go over it with a fine-tooth comb.
I love the fact that in universe, Scotty was the one who derailed transwarp drive for a good generation.
Yes!
You know?
Scotty's just like, no, I'm taking this out. Because Scotty was just like, there is a line, and that is too far.
He's a miracle worker engineer. He loves what he does with technology, but he totally, like, you know, this technology is awesome, but no.
Right.
You know?
But also, I think there's a fair point to say if Scotty could remove about 5 different bolts from a warp core and he could completely derail, maybe that warp core needs a revision, right?
Right.
So, I mean, there is an argument to be made that the technology may not have been baked enough. But even going through that, one of the greatest things I love about that movie is you also have, like you said, the destruction of the Enterprise, and there's that haunting score where they're watching it burning in orbit. You're looking at the Enterprise. This is the ship. Like, for an entire generation of people, this is their starship. I mean, Gary frequently on Facebook and Twitter and all over the place, he's like, that's my ship.
Yep.
And
I saw that movie in the theater as a 13-year-old, and watching that, just because of that scene, I was supposed to only be going to the theater to see that movie. I walked out just in shock, and I saw somebody had left their ticket like on a pinball machine. So I grabbed it and went in and watched it a second time. Because I had to see that scene again. Halfway through the movie, my stepfather, I see him start walking down the rows looking for me because he's come to pick me up, and I just slide down in my seat. And then afterwards, I call. I'm like, "Yeah, I need a ride home. Where were you? He went looking for you."
You're like, "But Dad,
like, this was important."
Yeah,
you know, this was
Starship.
The Enterprise Enterprise blew up, and the fact that
it's gone.
They took such a long time destroying the ship. I mean, the first explosion is a huge deal. And then you see half of that saucer falling into orbit, and you just see it streaking across the night sky, and Kirk has that great line, "Bones, what have I done?" And Bones says, "Well, you've done what you've always done. You've made a fighting chance out of death." I think is what he says. I might be paraphrasing that a little bit.
You made a fighting chance for life out of death.
Yeah. It's such a great line, and then of course you get to the end where basically Spock asks, "Why would you have done this for me?" And he goes, "Because sometimes the needs of the one outweighs the needs of the many." And anybody who has ever put themselves in harm's way to protect another person knows that is absolutely true. Sometimes you will do everything you can to save that one person, even though the smart move might be to go over and save these people over here. Your heart, the people who you love, if you can save them, you will do everything possible to save them. And how can you not love a movie that's the core of that value? I mean, it's just great. Yeah. And I know people crap on it, but there's so much about this movie to love. And again, if everything else doesn't move you, Christopher Lloyd is a freaking Klingon.
And the fact that it works is a miracle because it's got so many strikes against it. They'd cut the budget again.
Yeah.
They didn't have for sets or anything. They cut the cast. It was Nimoy's first actual directing job.
Right.
This should have been a complete and utter train wreck. And
not
it
to
works.
mention the fact that even Kirstie Alley doesn't even come back as Saavik, so you have that weird disconnect. And I forget the actress who plays her in part 3.
Robin Curtis.
Robin Curtis.
So it was Robin Curtis, you say?
There may be some nerds here who know
that
this
was
information.
One or two people, yeah. But I
Little
mean,
bit.
there is a bit of a disconnect because you get so used to Kirstie Alley that when Robin Curtis comes in, through no fault of her own, her style is just her style, and it's weird. You're like, that's not what I remember Saavik being like. And I mean, even her hair changed. Like her hair is a lot more curly in this one. And you're like, wait, Saavik went to the to get her hair done before they left. Like it's a weird glitch.
And they kill Kirk's son after we just gotten him.
Yes, that was one. But I think that quite frankly they have earned that particular story beat and I know we've gotten way into Trek talk here. We'll do Trek talk on other panels, I promise. But I think they earned that beat by and large because that becomes his main force. I mean, hell, half of the Undiscovered Country is about the fact that he can't let that go.
Yeah.
So his animosity towards Klingons, that just it solidifies that in a really great way. And and that's why when you get to the end of Undiscovered Country, when he finally says, where the daughter says, "You redeemed my father," and he says, "You redeemed my son," like that's a big moment. And I feel it's an earned moment. But the one true strike that I have to give against this movie is the only. I am mad about it because she's one of my favorite characters on the crew. And she disappears with Mr. Adventure, is they wrote Uhura out halfway through the damn flick.
Amen.
Like, she just vanishes.
Amen.
Go on.
Yeah.
I'll meet you on Vulcan. Like, okay, so you don't get the adventure? Like, come on.
She doesn't get to go with the crew? What this shit?
Right.
I was a little mad about that, I'll be honest. So, but anyways, we're going to start wrapping up here in a few minutes. We're going to go through Eric's choice, and then I'll give one, and then we'll start to wrap up. So for those of you who've been staying a little bit later, I know we're already about 10 minutes over where I was normally going to be, but that's okay. I'm loving this panel. It's the last one of the night, so let's go ahead and rally through. Eric, what do you got for us, buddy?
Hopefully I'm not coming in like a robot because I lost you guys for like three different times.
No, you're good.
Okay. So I kind of hope you'll go with the one I don't go with, Sean, because in the back of my head I'm like I should go with this, but I'm gonna go left field, and it's another comedy. And so you have people in the world who always bring up the Lethal Weapons, Die Hards, the whatever the Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan one is, and all those, but you got to look at 1984, and since we've already talked about this person earlier and how they missed Ghostbusters, he had another franchise under his belt, and that's of course Beverly Hills Cop, and that is Eddie Murphy at his best in a movie that possibly has one of the best themes of the 80s. Yeah, because the second you think of this movie, you get that song stuck in your head.
It's true.
And I'd play it, but I don't want Sean demonetized.
Right. We don't want to copyright strike me. But Gary gave us a wonderful rendition of "We Don't Need Another Hero" on the last panel. Gary, can you give us a drop down of the Beverly Hills Cop theme song?
The only one that's coming to mind for me right now is Axel F, which has no lyrics.
Yeah.
Dun dun
Yep.
dun 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 dun.
Yeah, no, that's the one
And then it kicks with the beat.
Right.
Pure 80s synth pop at its finest.
So much fun.
That was one of the first things I learned to play on the piano.
Who was that? Was somebody knocking on somebody's door?
No, that was me. Sorry.
Oh, was that you? I thought somebody was like, I got your Uber Eats.
I was playing on the piano on my desk and then forgetting that there's like a microphone here that's very sensitive. I was doing that accidentally.
That's funny. No, absolutely. But no, I mean, Beverly Hills Cop is a phenomenal movie, and it really is. I mean, you know, Eddie Murphy was already a star prior to this film, you know, but this really made him Eddie Murphy.
Holy
I mean,
shit, yeah.
I mean, basically off just off of the sweat of this movie, his career took a trajectory that would not hit low until the early 2000s. I mean, it's a 20-year trajectory because of Beverly Hills Cop. And unfortunately, we cannot say he landed it well because you get to like Pluto Nash like in 2001, I think. And
yeah.
But
we like to forget that his Haunted Mansion movie happened. Ugh.
Oh God!
But you know what? I never slight him for Haunted Mansion for one reason. Disney said, "Here's a really large sum of money because we're going to make this movie with or without you," and he was like, "Give me the payday."
And it's for kids, technically, so you know it's a little bit of a different era for him. It's not the Eddie Murphy we grew up with, Eddie Murphy Raw.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's probably, I think, again, the only strike I would put against Beverly Hills Cop. And it's kind of the same strike I would put against Revenge of the Nerds that Kristen had, which is it is very much a product of its time. And there are some problematic elements in that movie. So if you go back and watch it, there's some things like he makes fun of gay people at one point. If I remember correctly, the herpes simplex 10 is in the first one, right?
Yeah.
You know, so he's kind of doing some stuff, you know, they're making allusions to AIDS and whatnot. And he's not trying to be mean, but that was just the comedy of the time, but it doesn't age as well as other elements. But there's a lot of really good material still in there. So, you know, that's probably the one downside to watching movies that are very much of its time is that sometimes you hit these walls where you're like, ooh, that does not sync up with today culturally. But if you can get
especially
past...
in comedy, because comedy changes so much.
Absolutely. But if you can get past that, and again, I would say the vast majority of the stuff ages well. I would say like what, maybe 10% is problematic, if that.
Yeah.
So
good action and good storytelling.
And it is one of those really like it was one of those prototype movies that was intensely funny, but also a really good action film too.
Yeah.
So it really balances both of those elements. So yeah, that's a great pick, Eric. I love that.
I was gonna say I will fight anybody that doesn't give Judge Reinhold the respect that man deserves.
Yes, absolutely. That and Bronson Pinchot as what was his name?
Serge. Yes.
Serge. I'm Serge. Oh man, that Serge character. I mean, basically he was playing Balky from Perfect Strangers later, but oh my god, like
it's a very pretentious Balky.
Yes, a very pretentious Balky. But I love my favorite version of Serge is in I think 3 when he is the arms dealer. And he has all of like the guns, but like he's got like these semi-automatic weapons, but they have TVs built into them and like a microwave. And oh my god, seriously, the Beverly Hills Cop series is just a ton of fun. And what's really fun, especially about the first two, is they don't really retread old material. They find a way of continually, you know, working in new ways. Third one is a little bit of a retread, but the first two are just top-notch solid. So yeah, Beverly Hills Cop is just fantastic. So this brings us to the last movie suggestion of the night. And again, there are so many we didn't talk about. You know, the Karate Kid we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about Friday the 13th, the final chapter, which in most people's opinion is the best of the Friday the 13th. We didn't really get into Nightmare on Elm Street. We didn't talk about Conan the Destroyer. But the last movie that I'm going to mention is one that I will fight because in my mind, it is the only time this character was ever effective as a hero because he knew the rules behind the MacGuffin in the movie. And if he had stood back and done nothing like he did in other movies, the world would have come to the end. They would have actually gone into darkness and everybody would have died horrible, horrible deaths. I am talking about the one that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas have basically rejected because they're wusses, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yes.
So good, yeah.
Great
So
movie.
I show my homework on this one. If you go back and watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, those Nazis are so dumb. They don't know that if you just open the Ark up, you're going to die. So what do? They just open it up. Ultimately, if Indiana Jones would have stayed home and had himself a nice cocktail and a ham sandwich, that movie would have ended the same damn way. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You can't take the cup, cross the threshold. If they'd have tried to, they'd have gone into the gulch. They'd have all died. If he'd have stayed at home with his dad in Venice somewhere, it'd have been cool. That movie would have ended the exact same way. In Temple of Doom, Mola Ram knows how to use the Shankara stones. He already has 3. If he gets all 5, that's it. The world is plunged into darkness. And we see how powerful his magic is with only 3. If Indiana Jones does not fight his ass off to get those stones away from Mola Ram, that's it for the world. He actually fights, he almost loses, and he actually becomes a successful hero. And at the end of that film, he saves like 2,000 freaking little kids. How can you hate on a movie where you save 2,000 kids? But this movie, people get like really, really like, Temple of Doom, I don't like it. And I'm like, you guys are stupid.
I think
It's because it was. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, it's because it was such a tonal change. The first one was such a high, rip-roaring adventure. And like you said, what makes this one stronger is it is a more serious, it's a little darker. And I don't think people went in expecting that.
Right.
But I'll also never forget the conversation I had with a friend one time who was like, I'm going to go home and watch Temple of Doom. I went, really? And he went, hey, look, even bad Indiana Jones is better than most good movies.
Right, but remember, there are only 3 Indiana Jones movies. There is no 4th one. We're still waiting for the 4th one. It has never come out, ever. Hold on. There is no 4th Indiana Jones movie, okay?
Oh, gosh.
Okay. There's just a TV series.
I'm going to take my enjoyment of that other one and leave.
You know,
I still haven't watched it.
Yeah,
I haven't either. I was like,
you're not missing anything.
No,
it's not that bad. It's not great, but it's not that bad.
It's one of those movies that, like, if all of your friends don't go, oh my gosh, this is amazing, you're like, I'm just gonna skip by that one. I don't need to watch it.
There are parts about it that I like, but honestly, I'd rather talk about Temple of Doom.
Right.
So I'm just going to ignore part 4.
Can we talk about? I mean,
please.
We're sitting here talking about traumatic scenes, and 7 years old, and I watched this scene, and this guy's getting his freaking heart ripped out of his chest, and that I did not expect. I think as a child was coming from watching that first one, like this is an adventure, and then I saw that, and that was like really. I mean, I love magic, but anytime I see those like shamans doing these like deep dark something in the Amazon where they're summoning demons, it's like that type of shit scares me so much.
Totally.
That I remember seeing that and thinking like, wow, I felt so, I mean, like you had said, as a child, I felt like, wow, there's something just so gross and disturbing and dark happening in this movie. But that scene where he's ripping the heart out of that man's chest, it was like a torture scene, basically. And I definitely did not expect that. The eyeball soup. Yeah, exactly.
And Rachel wasn't a fan of the eyeball soup either, which is fair. I mean, these are both fair comments.
There were some sick things in that movie.
Yeah, I mean,
that movie's the whole reason we have the PG-13 rating. It was going to get an R.
Is it? Wow.
Yeah. Which actually brings us full circle to Calvin's point again. And I think, Calvin, you also had a comment, so please. Or maybe
no, absolutely. And I remember that whole, dinner scene and the eyeball soup was one. And I just had this perverse thought of, I always wanted to try chilled monkey brains. And it's just like so gross.
Oh my God. Yes.
I kind of agree with you. Like, there is a little part of my brain that's like, I kind of want to try it. But then there's a really large part of my brain that's like, no. But there is
and you're like,
Hannibal
Lecter.
Yeah, but I mean, how do you hate a movie with Short Round?
Yes. Right. And I know people slam Short Round, they're like, oh, well, Short Round's a horrible, sidekick. And I'm like, well, first off, it's a prequel. You have to remember it actually happens before Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is how Indy starts to kind of, he starts to stubbornly believe in magic, but he still doesn't want to believe in magic. And you know that he takes care of Short Round after that. You know, Short Round has gone off to some great college after Temple of Doom. He's like, kid, you're good. You know, like, I mean,
I would love to see them do. I think it was John Cho who posted it on Twitter, like in the last month, of the next Indiana Jones movie should be Indy handing over the hat and the whip to Short Round.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I would say probably even the problematic Willie, which Rachel actually just mentioned in the comments here, you know, screaming through the whole movie. I will admit, Willie is annoying. Nobody is going to justify that Willie is a great female protagonist.
Yeah. No.
But at the same time, she's kind of like the comic relief, and I will be the first person to say, you know what, I really appreciate her, because that's what this movie does. This movie basically continues to make it more and more tense the entire time through. It just gets downright creepy to the point of where you're on the edge of really dark horror movie material. In some cases, you cross right over to it when Molaron rips out a dude's heart and it catches on fire.
Yeah.
And then Willie screams, and you kind of, if you find it funny, you laugh, and if you don't, you roll your eyes. But either way, you have an emotional break from that tension. Yeah. So she's a good tension breaker.
You're saying that her character is so not great that it's funny.
I mean, I'm not going to say that's
basically what you're getting at.
I'm not saying that's an incorrect statement, but she works for the movie. Tonally, she helps break up those tense moments.
Yeah,
which keeps it, I think, as a PG-13 movie versus an R movie. Because I'm telling you, I've watched Indy in the Temple of Doom recently, and then I watched like Friday the 13th Part 4, and I'm like, okay, they got a little bit more blood in 4, but not by much. Indy is a much more traumatic movie. Like Temple of
really
Doom is way more traumatic, but yet that's a PG-13 flick. You know, and I'm like, it doesn't quite line up in my head, and I think it's because Willie breaks those moments up.
There's no sex. That's why. Like Bloodstone came back then in the 80s.
Yeah, literally, Short Round says, "No time for love, Dr. Jones." Right?
What my favorite tension breaks in there is you know, the death trap with the spikes coming down on top, and they're about to impale Indy, and it's like, you need to push the button. I can't. We are going to die. You know, and it breaks that tension up.
Yeah, and Eric, you have a comment?
Yes, Eric's raising his hand.
Yeah, don't forget, without Temple of Doom, we don't have the single greatest Clerks, the animated series episode either. Yeah, I went deep cuts on that.
Yeah, that is a deep cut. I have not watched the Clerks animated show probably since like 2003. So it's been a hot minute. So I'm not remembering exactly the reference that you're making. Do you want to explain it out a little bit for us?
Oh, no, like the last 10 minutes are full on Temple of Doom.
Oh, nice. There's nothing wrong with that. You know. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
No, I was saying, yeah, the last 10 minutes are full on Temple of Doom. It's the episode where Alec Baldwin delivers the against Dante when Dante's like, "Oh God, the kid in the helmet," and he goes, "Yes, look at him."
So there you go. Now you guys can also go and check out the Clerks animated series. And
I have not seen that series.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. Yeah, Clerks was
so good. It's only
if you've ever
Clerks is one of the best movies of all time.
Well, I've seen Clerks, but I haven't seen the animated series.
So one of the funniest things that the animated series ever did, and I know we're off topic now, but just so you know, Clerks, the first episode, the pilot is the pilot, and the second episode is a best of tape. So you know how they'll usually have like one of those clip episodes, like, you know, after the second or third season, it'll kind of get you caught up with all the best of scenes. They do that in the second episode. So at one point, they're literally flashing back to 2 minutes earlier in their own episode. So, like, it's one of those weird meta shows, but it's pretty damn funny. But seriously, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom for me, it is quintessential 1984. I mean, everything about it is absolutely top notch. The music is amazing. The set design is amazing. The character design is just absolutely. Where can you look at it and say, oh, this was an untrue statement or an untrue moment? I mean, the only thing out of Temple of Doom that I can give it a ding on is them jumping out of a plane with that freaking stupid raft, you know?
Yes.
You know, and I'm like, okay, fair enough. And I was like, but if closing your eyes against the freaking Ark of the Covenant is going to prevent Jesus from giving you a holy, bitch slap, I think, we can give him a wibbly wobbly a raft. So I tend to put those on equal level there. But that does not mean that you can survive a nuclear blast in a lead-lined refrigerator. kids.
Well, it's a stupid idea, Sean. Who would ever put that in a movie?
Right, who would ever put that in a movie? But yeah, so guys, this has been a phenomenal time. We are way over, but that's okay. It's the final one of the night, so it's not like we're bumping up against somebody else. Thank you for allowing us
for yourself, buddy.
Well, I meant like I meant like for another panel. I mean,
Sean's gonna be bumping. Don't worry.
Yeah, well. Hi, Internet. This is Awkward Hour. So Kristen, see, I knew she was about to bring out her glitter pillows again. I knew it. The hell was I saying? I was trying to say goodbye and be nice. Right. Sorry, I'm back. So this is our final episode for the night. We will be back at noon Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. With that episode, we will be starting the Ultimate Final Girls in Horror. Ooh. And if you have not heard about this yet, it's actually something that Gary has done on a couple of panels, and I love this idea, and it's basically going to be a grudge match. We have picked 8 final girls, and all of our panelists, we are going to have a conversation about each of the final girls and how they're going to escape the monster. So during the panel, we're going to pick and decide what monster, what creature could kill all 8 of these women. And then we're going to basically have brackets, Sigourney Weaver versus, Jamie Lee Curtis, right? And who out of that would be killed by the monster first? Would they murder each other, or would one of them die to the monster? However that works out. And we're just going to come up with random stories until we finally get down to the last 2 final girls and who will be the ultimate final girl if a movie was comprised of all of these final girls.
That's amazing. Then you need to make that movie.
Yeah, I am really excited for this one. It should be a lot of fun. I've heard it before in other venues and whatnot. It's always been a fun journey. It should be completely ridiculous. We would have gone with a larger bracket, but we only have an hour to do it, so I thought 8 characters would be more than enough. So I do hope that everybody will come back and check that out. And let me just go ahead and do a quick plug real quick for our store. If you haven't had a chance to go check that out yet, you can go and check us out over at popcycledbaubles.com. If you do so, you can actually get links to our Pop Con schedule. You can check out all of our guests here. So if you haven't gone and checked out their personal links, you can follow them on Instagram, check out all their different social medias, as well as any of their personal websites that they have there, as well as click on our shop link. And the reason why I bring that up is it has been 5 years since we have actually had an online store for Pop Cycle Baubles. We consider ourselves to be a con-exclusive boutique store, meaning we never actually sell online. And people have been asking for the entire quarantine, hey, will you do a store? And we said, yeah, but if we're going to do it, let's celebrate it. So we decided that we're going to throw a convention, which is called Pop Con, just to celebrate the fact that we're opening up this store. Of course, you are not obligated to buy a single thing, but every single piece that you do buy helps us prepare for 2021, where we're finally able to go back out and see you face-to-face at our favorite shows. So if you do have a chance to go do that, please go check that out. And if you could buy something, great. And if not, no problem. Just keep coming back. Enjoy the shows with us. And at the very least, tell some of your friends. Tell them to come and hang out with us. Really, that's how we're going to continue to grow and continue to make this happen. Because if we continue to have the great turnout like we had today, we're definitely going to do this again down the line again. Because I'm having a blast with this. And I just want to say thank you, each and every one of you who have come in, who have made comments, and who have been on our panelists. So again, let me just say to our panelists, thank you so much. Calvin, Gary, Kristen, Eric, Michael, you guys have been phenomenal. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening, being here with us. It means just the world to me, and I cannot thank you enough. I just want you guys to know that you have made the first day of Pop Con so much fun, and I can't wait till tomorrow.
Yay!
So with that sappy stuff, we got a little thanks for the stream here. I'm going to put this up. Oh, see, so for those of you who made it all the way to the end, thank you so much. We will see you tomorrow again. That's going to be 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. And this is Sean speaking for Laura. She's downstairs with the puppy dogs. And of course, all of our panelists, thank you so much. We will see you tomorrow. And until then, don't forget to take care of yourself. Use your hand sanitizer. If you got to go outside, wear a mask. And of course, take care.